He missed work on a Tuesday, not by choice, but because the girl in the hospital room had no one else to watch her. The nurse had asked once. Then again. The third time, she didn't wait for an answer. She left the door open and the hallway noise drained away. What remained was the sound of a child breathing and the weight of a decision that would not reverse itself. He sat in the plastic chair and checked the time. His shift had already started. His phone stayed dark. No missed calls. No messages. Just the knowledge that absence would be noticed. He didn't know who the girl's mother was. Only that she hadn't arrived. Only that the paperwork said, guardian unknown. By the end of the day, he would learn her name and realize it was already too late to undo anything. If you value quiet, story-driven work like this, consider subscribing. These stories reward patience. The chair was lighter than it looked. When he pulled it closer to the wall, it scraped once against the floor and then stopped. He adjusted it with his foot until it lined up with the door frame, close enough to see inside the room without being in the way. The girl was asleep. Her leg was elevated and wrapped, the blanket tucked too high under her chin. A screen beside the bed blinked at a steady pace. He didn't know what the numbers meant, only that they hadn't changed since he sat down. He checked his phone. 8:42 a.m. His shift had started at 8. Normally this was the part of the day when he was already moving, clocking in, pulling gloves from a box, nodding at people he didn't talk to much but saw every day. His life worked because it moved on time. He didn't need it to be easy. He just needed it to be predictable. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and something warm underneath it. Food, maybe. A cart rolled past once, then again. Each time, the sound faded quickly, like it didn't belong to him. A nurse had stopped earlier. She had asked if he was family. Her tone was neutral, the way people spoke when the answer mattered, but they didn't want to push. He had paused longer than he should have. I'm with her, he said finally. The nurse nodded, already turning away. That was enough for now. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The chair was hard, molded plastic. It didn't invite comfort. He preferred that. Soft things made it harder to leave. Inside the room, the girl shifted, her eyes opened briefly, unfocused. She looked at him without recognition, then at the ceiling. Water, she asked. Her voice was thin but steady. He stood up. The movement made his back tighten. He walked to the small counter by the sink and poured water into a paper cup. He added a straw because it seemed right. When he brought it to her, she tried to lift her head and failed. He adjusted the bed with the button on the rail, watching the angle change. He didn't rush. She drank in small pulls. When she was done, she let the straw slip from her mouth and closed her eyes again. Thanks, she said, already half asleep. He set the cup down and wiped a drop that had spilled onto the blanket. The motion was automatic. He'd done it before, with his own kid, with spills that mattered less and felt heavier. He sat back down. 8577A. He imagined the floor at work filling up, the supervisor glancing at the clock, the note made in a system that didn't care why. Absence was absence. Reasons only mattered when someone decided they did. He could still call, explain, say there was an emergency. That word usually bought time. He held the phone in his hand but didn't unlock it. Through the glass, the girl's chest rose and fell. The machine kept blinking. Nothing changed. The man in a suit walked past the hallway entrance and slowed, looking in. He nodded once at him, the way people did when they weren't sure who someone was, but assumed they belonged. He nodded back. The door to the room stayed open. No one asked him to leave. No one asked him to stay. At 9:15, his phone vibrated. He didn't look at it. He knew what it would be, or he thought he did. He stared at the wall instead. There was a small mark near the baseboard, like a shoe scuff. Someone had tried to clean it and failed. It stayed. Another nurse came by and adjusted the IV. She spoke to the girl softly, using her name. He caught it then, but didn't repeat it. Names made things harder to step away from. When the nurse finished, she glanced at him again. You okay here? Yes, he said. It was true in the narrowest sense. 10:02 a.m. He shifted in the chair. The scrape was louder this time. He stilled it with his foot. He thought about his daughter's lunch sitting in the fridge at home, packed the night before. He thought about the note he'd written on a scrap of paper because he'd forgotten sticky notes again. He thought about how often forgetting small things cost him more than big mistakes ever did. Inside the room, the girl stirred again, but didn't wake. Her hand rested on top of the blanket, fingers curled loosely, unguarded. He stayed where he was, not because he decided anything, because getting up would have meant choosing to leave, and he wasn't ready to do that yet. At 10:30, the hallway grew quieter. The cart stopped passing. The voices lowered. Morning moved into something slower, heavier. He checked his phone again. 2 missed calls now, both from work. He didn't open them. He stood and stretched his legs, then walked a few steps down the hall and back. The floor tiles were scuffed in long arcs, paths worn by people who walked the same routes every day. He wondered how many of them had once thought they'd be somewhere else by now. Inside the room, the girl slept through it all. Her breathing stayed even. The screen blinked without urgency. He sat again. Fear wasn't sharp. It didn't spike or rush. It settled. It felt like weight added a little at a time, unnoticed until it made movement harder. He knew the policy. Everyone did. 3 unexcused absences in a quarter triggered a review. Reviews triggered conversations. Conversations triggered decisions that were already made. He had 1 absence left. The word emergency circled in his mind, not as an excuse, but as a calculation. Did this qualify? Would anyone else agree if he said it out loud? He hadn't brought her here. He wasn't related. He had just been present when no one else was. Presence didn't show up on forms. At 11:05, the girl woke again. She squinted at the light, then turned her head toward him. "Is it still morning?" she asked. "Almost noon," he said. She frowned, like that mattered. "My mom said she'd come back." He nodded. "She will." He didn't know that. But saying otherwise wouldn't help. The girl shifted and winced. Her hand tightened around the blanket. He watched her face for cues, then pressed the call button when her breathing changed. The nurse came quickly. Adjusted something. Asked about pain. The girl answered with a number, practiced like she'd been taught. When it was over, the nurse lingered a second longer than necessary. "You've been here all morning," she said. "Yes. You need anything?" He shook his head. "I'm fine." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Good." When she left, he realized his leg had started bouncing. He forced it still. 11:42. His phone vibrated again. A message this time. He unlocked it. "This is your supervisor. Call me as soon as you get this." No punctuation. That meant nothing. Or everything. He typed a response and deleted it. Type another. Deleted that too. The words didn't line up right. They either sounded like excuses or admissions. Neither felt safe. He put the phone face down on his thigh. The girl watched him. "You in trouble?" she asked. The question was simple. Curious, not afraid. "No," he said after a moment. "Just busy." She accepted that easily. Kids often did. She picked at the edge of the blanket. "You can sit closer if you want." He moved the chair. Not all the way in, just enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. At noon, an announcement came over the intercom. Visiting hours, lunch schedules, information that applied to someone else. He thought about his daughter again, about her school day breaking into parts he wasn't there to see, about the after-school program that charged extra if pickup was late, about the neighbor who had helped once before and would help again if asked. He hadn't asked yet. Fear shifted shape. It wasn't just about losing the job anymore. It was about what came after, the waiting, the explaining, the math that never quite worked. At 12:18, a new message appeared. This one wasn't from work. It was a video file. He frowned, then tapped it. His daughter's face filled the screen, framed awkwardly. She was sitting at a table, her backpack behind her. A teacher's voice prompted softly from off camera. "Hi, Daddy," she said, reading from something below the screen. "I hope you're okay." "I'm okay." I ate my apple even though it was bruised. I'll see you later." She waved, then smiled like she wasn't sure if that was the end. The video stopped. He didn't replay it. He closed his eyes and let his head rest against the wall, just for a second. Just long enough to breathe all the way out. When he opened them, the girl in the bed was watching him again. "You can use my charger if you need," she said. "It's under there." She pointed weakly. "Thank you," he said. He didn't move to take it. At 12:40, footsteps approached that sounded different, slower. He looked up. A woman stood at the doorway, already reading the chart. She wore a coat she hadn't taken off yet. Her hair was pulled back tight. She didn't rush, but she didn't waste time either. She glanced at him briefly. Not dismissive, just sorting. "Are you with her?" she asked. He stood. "Yes." She nodded once and stepped inside, already reaching for the bedrail. The hallway noise faded again as the door swung wider. His phone buzzed in his hand. He ignored it. The fear didn't leave. It waited. She didn't sit. She stood at the foot of the bed, one hand on the rail, the other holding the clipboard. Her eyes moved quickly, not missing much. When the girl stirred, she leaned in and spoke her name in a low voice that carried expectation more than comfort. "I'm here," she said. "I have a meeting in an hour." The girl nodded, still groggy. That seemed to satisfy her. Only then did she look at him again. "Thank you for staying," she said. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. It landed exactly where it was meant to. "Are you hospital staff?" "No," he said. She waited. The pause invited clarification. "I was here when she came in," he added. "That's fine," she said, already turning back to the chart. "Someone should be." She signed at the bottom of the page with a pen she pulled from her coat pocket. The motion was practiced. Final. A nurse entered with a tray and froze slightly when she saw the woman. Her posture shifted. Her voice softened. "Good morning," the nurse said. "Morning," the woman replied without looking up. The nurse went through the routine quickly. Pain scale. Vitals. The woman listened, interrupting only once to ask about discharge timing. The answer wasn't what she wanted. She accepted it without comment. He stood off to the side, hands in his pockets. No one asked him to leave. No one asked him to speak. When the nurse finished and left, the room felt smaller. The woman checked her watch. It was expensive, but plain. No decoration. Function over display. "I'll be back later," she said to the girl. "Do what they tell you." The girl nodded again. Her eyes followed her mother, though the word hadn't been used. As the woman turned to go, she looked at him one more time. "You can go if you need to," she said. "I'll have someone come by." He shook his head. "I'm okay." She studied him for half a second longer, then nodded. "All right." She left without another word. The door didn't close all the way. The hallway came back in pieces. Footsteps. A laugh. A phone ringing somewhere far off. The girl stared at the door after her mother disappeared. "She's busy," she said. "Yes," he said. The girl sighed and shifted in the bed. "She always is." He didn't respond. There wasn't a right way to do it. He pulled the chair a little closer again, the legs scraping softly. He sat where he had before, just outside the bed's reach. At 1:15, his phone vibrated again. He didn't look. He didn't need to. The woman returned briefly at 1:30 with another person in a suit. They spoke in low voices near the door. Words like timeline and liability drifted through the room without context. The girl watched the ceiling. The woman left again. This time, she closed the door. The quiet after felt heavier than before. Not peaceful, just sealed. He leaned back and let his head touch the wall. He thought about how easily she moved through the space, how the staff bent around her without being told, how no one questioned her decisions. Authority wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. At 2 rise, the girl spoke again. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" He looked at her. "I don't know." She accepted that too. Kids often did until they didn't. She turned onto her side carefully, facing away from the door now. The monitor beeped once, then settled. He watched her until her breathing slowed. Then he finally looked at his phone. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. He didn't open it yet. He stared at the screen until it dimmed and went dark. The woman returned one last time at 2:40. This time alone. She stood in the doorway and watched the girl sleep. "She'll be fine," she said quietly. Not to him, to herself. He nodded anyway. She looked at him, really looked, like she was placing him into a category. "Thank you," she said again. "I appreciate it." The words landed differently this time. Not heavier, just clearer. She left. At 3:10, the voicemail icon still glowed. He pressed play. The stairwell was cooler than the hallway. The concrete walls held the temperature, steady and indifferent. He stood on the landing between floors, phone pressed to his ear, listening. His supervisor's voice came through cleanly. Calm. Too calm for good news. "We've tried reaching you," she said. "You know how this works." He leaned one hand against the rail. The metal was cold. "I understand," he said. There was a pause, papers shifting, a breath taken before the next sentence. "This is your 3rd absence this quarter," she continued, without prior notice. "We've documented the previous warnings." "Yes," he said. "We have to be consistent." Another pause, longer this time. Not for his sake. For procedure. "Effective immediately," she said. "Your position is terminated." The word landed without echo. No sharp sound. Just wait. He waited for something else. An opening. A question. There wasn't one. "You'll receive information about final pay by email," she added. "I'm sorry." "I know," he said. The call ended. He didn't move right away. He stayed where he was, hand still on the rail, phone still against his ear. It took a moment to realize the line was dead. He lowered the phone and sat down on the step. The concrete pressed through his pants. He welcomed it. Termination was a word he'd heard before, applied to machines, processes, things that stopped because they were meant to. He thought about his badge still in his pocket, about the locker that would be cleared by someone else, about the gloves he'd left folded on the bench that morning. He didn't think about anger. There wasn't room. He thought about rent, about the calendar taped to the fridge at home, about the number he kept in his head, the one that told him how many weeks he could last if nothing went wrong. He stood up. The movement felt slower now, like the air had thickened. As he pushed the stairwell door open, a sign caught his eye. Authorized personnel only. It had been there forever. He'd never noticed it before. Back in the hallway, the light felt brighter, the noise louder. The world hadn't adjusted to the fact that something had ended. He walked back toward the room. Outside the door, a clipboard hung on a hook. He hadn't looked at it before. Now he did. The hospital logo sat at the top. Below it, the girl's name. Beneath that, a line labeled parent/guardian. The woman's name was written there. Clean. Confident. He recognized it immediately. It was the name on the paychecks, on the emails that came down through layers of management. The name spoken carefully in meetings, like saying it too casually might be noticed. The CEO. He stared at the ink until it blurred. Inside the room, the girl was awake again. She was watching a cartoon on mute, her eyes tracking the movement without sound. He stepped in and pulled the chair back into place. The scrape sounded louder than before. She looked at him. "You're back." "Yes," he said. "You were gone a long time. I had to take a call." She nodded, satisfied. He sat down and rested his hands on his knees. They felt empty, like they were waiting to hold something and hadn't been told what yet. The woman wasn't there. The room felt different without her. Less controlled, more fragile. He glanced at the monitor. The numbers were still steady. The girl shifted and winced. He leaned forward automatically, pressing the call button. The nurse came and adjusted the bed, asked the same questions, made the same notes. When the nurse left, the girl looked at him again. "Are you okay?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. It wasn't what kids usually asked adults. "Yes," he said after a moment. The word felt thinner now, but it still fit. Barely. She studied his face like she was checking for something. Then she turned back to the screen. He took his phone out again. The email notification had already arrived. Subject line, plain. Next steps. He didn't open it. Instead, he looked at the woman's name on the clipboard again. He thought about the way she'd signed the forms, about how easily she'd moved through the space, about how her absence from the room hadn't stopped anything from happening. He wondered if she knew. If she would know. If it mattered. The answer didn't come. At 3:30, the girl's cartoon ended. She didn't ask for another. "Can you stay?" she asked, not looking at him. He could leave. No one would stop him. He no longer had a shift to miss. "Yes," he said. The word landed differently now. He felt it settle, heavier than before. He leaned back in the chair. The plastic creaked softly. Outside, the hallway moved on. Inside, something had already changed. By late afternoon, the room smelled faintly of reheated food. Someone had brought a tray and left it untouched on the counter. The lid stayed on. The steam found its way out anyway. He didn't ask if he should eat. He didn't feel hungry. Hunger required permission from the body, and his hadn't offered it. The girl watched him unwrap a napkin and fold it, then fold it again. She didn't comment. At 4:10, the woman returned. She was on the phone, voice low, words clipped. She paused just inside the door, eyes on the girl, hand covering the receiver. "I'll call you back," she said. Then she ended the call without waiting. She stepped closer to the bed and brushed the girl's hair back from her face. The gesture was brief. Not unkind. Not lingering. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Okay," the girl said. He stayed. The woman looked at him. Something shifted. Not surprise. "Assessment." "Yes," she said. "I see that." She set her phone down on the counter and finally sat. The chair creaked under her weight. She adjusted her jacket, smoothing it flat, then leaned forward. "The doctors say another night," she said. "They want to be cautious." The girl nodded, disappointed but not shocked. "I have meetings," the woman added. "I'll come back later." The girl didn't respond. She turned her head toward the window. The woman stood again and reached for her phone. "You can go," she said to him, not unkindly. "There's no need. I'll stay," he said. She stopped, looked at him again, longer this time. "All right," she said. She left without saying anything else. The door closed fully behind her. He didn't feel relief when she was gone. He felt pressure, the kind that settled behind the eyes. The girl broke the silence. "She doesn't like hospitals." "No," he said. "She doesn't like waiting either." He nodded. At 5:02, his neighbor texted, "I can pick her up. Just tell me where to drop her." He stared at the message. His thumb hovered. Then he typed back, "Thank you. I'll let you know." He didn't send anything else. The girl shifted again. Her foot bumped the rail, metal on metal. "Does your leg hurt?" he asked. "A little." He pressed the call button. The nurse came, gave medication, adjusted the pillow. The routine was efficient. Familiar? Afterward, the girl looked at him and said, "You didn't leave." It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't accusation. It was observation. "No," he said. She nodded like she'd confirmed something. The room grew quiet again. At 6:30, the woman returned with a laptop under her arm. She set it on the counter and opened it without sitting. Emails filled the screen. She scrolled while standing. "I'll be here for a bit," she said, mostly to the room. She didn't ask him anything. She didn't thank him again. Resentment rose slowly, not toward the girl, not even fully toward the woman, toward the space between them, toward the ease with which she could leave and return, while he stayed rooted, absorbing cost without acknowledgement. He folded the napkin again, then unfolded it, then set it aside. At 7:15, his phone buzzed with an automated message. Payment reminder. He deleted it without opening. The girl slept. The woman typed. The keys made a steady sound, unbroken. He thought about standing up, about saying something, about naming what had happened. The words formed and fell apart before they reached his mouth. He stayed. At 80, the woman closed the laptop and finally looked at him. "Can you stay another hour?" she asked. "I need to step out." He didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said. She nodded once. "Thank you." She left again. The door closed. The resentment didn't fade. It settled deeper, like something placed carefully where it wouldn't be seen. He looked at the girl, asleep, unguarded. Outside the room, the hallway lights dimmed slightly. Evening took hold. He stayed anyway, not because he forgave, because leaving now would have meant admitting the cost had been for nothing, and he wasn't ready to accept that yet. The woman came back just before 9. She didn't knock. She paused in the doorway and watched the girl sleep, her face unreadable in the low light. He was standing by the window. He hadn't realized he'd stood up until his legs started to ache. "She's out," he said quietly. "I see that," she said. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. This time, she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't open the laptop. She walked to the chair at the side of the bed and sat down. The chair creaked. He noticed it because she noticed it too. "How long have you been here?" she asked. "All day," he said. She nodded like she was confirming a number she already had. There was a pause, the kind that invited honesty without demanding it. "I lost my job today," he said. The words didn't shake when he said them. They came out flat, already settled. Her head turned toward him. Not sharply, just enough. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment. He waited. Nothing followed. "It was because I stayed," he added. "I missed my shift." She looked down at her hands. They were folded loosely in her lap. No rings, no tremor. "I didn't know," she said. He believed her, or he chose to. Another pause. Longer this time. "I can make a call," she said. "We can fix that." The offer landed cleanly. Simple, efficient, the way things were done. He didn't answer right away. He walked back to the chair and sat, the plastic pressed into the backs of his legs. "I need to think," he said. She nodded. "Of course." She reached up and removed her watch, setting it on the counter. The movement was small, but it changed the room. Time loosened slightly. He looked at the girl. Her hand rested on the blanket, fingers curled, the same way they had been earlier. "I didn't stay for you," he said, not looking at the woman. "And I didn't stay for the job." She listened. She didn't interrupt. "I stayed because if I left, she would have learned something I didn't want her to learn." The woman's breath caught, just barely. "She's learned worse," she said quietly. "Maybe," he said, "but not from me." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clear. The woman leaned back in the chair. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked tired. "Take the night," she said. "Think about it." He nodded. At 9:30, she stood and picked up her watch. She didn't put it back on. "I'll be back in the morning," she said. He stayed seated. "All right." She paused at the door. "Thank you," she said again. This time, it wasn't procedural. She left. He sat with the quiet, with the cost laid out cleanly in front of him, with the understanding that the offer, once accepted, would erase something he wasn't sure he wanted erased. At 10 a nurse came in to check vitals. She smiled at him, tired but kind. "Long day," she said. "Yes," he said. When she left, he looked at his phone. No new messages, no miracles. He didn't need them. He sat until the lights dimmed further and the hallway fell into its night rhythm. The cost didn't disappear, but he could see it now. Morning came without ceremony. The light through the window was thin and gray, like it hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. He hadn't slept much. The chair hadn't softened overnight. His back ached in a way that felt earned. The girl was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Is it morning?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Are you still here?" "Yes." She nodded. That was enough. At 8:15, the woman arrived. No laptop this time. No phone in her hand. She stood by the bed and watched her daughter drink juice through a straw. "She's doing better," she said. "They're talking about discharge this afternoon." "That's good," he said. The woman turned to him. "I made the call." He waited. "They can reinstate you," she said. "Same position, same pay." The offer was clean. No apology. No explanation. Just restoration. He looked at the girl. She was focused on the juice, working the straw carefully, determined not to spill. "I appreciate that," he said. The woman nodded, like she'd expected that part. "I can't take it," he said. The words landed quietly. She didn't react right away. She studied his face, searching for something she might have missed. "Why?" she asked. He stood and reached for his jacket, draped over the back of the chair. He held it in his hands instead of putting it on. "Because if I do," he said, "then this becomes a favor." She didn't interrupt. "And I don't want her to think," he continued, glancing at the bed, "that people stay only when they're paid to." The girl looked up then. Not fully understanding, but listening, the woman exhaled slowly. The sound carried more weight than any argument would have. "All right," she said. She didn't press. She didn't persuade. Authority shifted. Not because she let it go, but because it wasn't accepted. He slipped his jacket on. The fabric felt heavier than it should have. "I'll go now," he said. The girl frowned. "You're leaving?" "Yes," he said. "But you'll be okay." She considered this, then she nodded, serious. "Okay," she said. He hesitated, then reached out and adjusted the blanket around her foot. The movement was careful. Final. The woman watched. She didn't look away. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. That was enough. He walked out of the room without looking back. The hallway was louder in the morning. Phones rang. Carts rolled. People moved with purpose. At the exit, he paused long enough to pull the badge from his pocket. He held it for a moment, then dropped it into the return bin. It clattered once and disappeared. Outside, the air was cold and clean. He stood on the sidewalk, jacket zipped, hands in his pockets. He didn't feel lighter. He felt exact. The decision had cost him something real. That mattered. He walked away from the hospital without checking his phone. The building stayed where it was. So did the consequences. The apartment was quiet when he got home. Not the hollow kind of quiet that echoed, but the settled kind that waited. He set his keys on the counter instead of dropping them into the bowl by the door. The sound was softer that way. He took his jacket off and hung it on the chair at the small table. The chair had been there for years. He'd never sat in it much before. He checked the fridge. The lunch he'd packed was still there. The apple was bruised, just like his daughter had said. He rinsed it and set it on the counter instead of throwing it away. At 10:30, his daughter came out of her room with her backpack still on. "You're home early," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at him longer than usual, like she was checking the shape of the day. "Did you get fired?" The question wasn't dramatic, it was practical. "Yes," he said. She nodded, absorbing it. "Okay." She set her backpack down and took her shoes off carefully, lining them up against the wall. He watched her do it. He hadn't taught her that. She'd picked it up by watching. They sat at the table together. He sliced the apple and pushed half toward her. She ate it without comment. The next few days moved slowly. He walked her to school instead of driving. They waited at corners longer. He noticed things he hadn't before. Cracks in the sidewalk. A stray cat that lived under the bus stop bench. He filled out applications in the afternoons, not urgently, carefully. He read each one all the way through. At night, he sat in the chair by the table. The same chair he'd hung his jacket on that first day. It creaked when he leaned back. He didn't mind. He thought about the hospital sometimes, about the hallway light, about the way staying had felt heavier than leaving. He didn't replay conversations. He didn't imagine different endings. He noticed what wasn't there. No alarm set for early mornings. No uniform folded at the foot of the bed. No voice on the phone explaining policy. The absence was real. So was the space it left. One afternoon, his daughter asked, "Are you going back to work?" Yes, he said. Just not yet. She considered that. Okay. She didn't ask where. She trusted the answer without details. On Friday, he packed her lunch again. This time, he used the container instead of a paper bag. He wrote the note on a proper card he'd found in a drawer. It wasn't fancy, just clean. He walked her to the door. She paused before leaving. You stayed, she said. He looked at her. Yes. She smiled once, quick and certain, then ran to join her friends. He went back inside and sat down. The chair didn't feel like a waiting place anymore. It felt like where he was meant to be, for now. Outside, the day moved on. He let it. Something in the world had shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but it had changed. And he stayed seated long enough to feel it.